we have so much to get through here. Echo and Emerie breaking the kids out, even though they're trying to break themselves out. We have the batch. The base is on lockdown. How are they going to get in? There's 2 mountains. Like, is Echo trying to contact Rex? They want to free the other clones.
Now we're introducing a monster, and there's so many things that they could do in 22 minutes next week. I'm hoping it's more than a 22-minute episode. I mean, it'll be action freaking packed if they do all that. Let's put it that way.
Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan.
Welcome, everyone, to Krypton to Alderaan. I'm Joey, your Star Wars lover, and with me is Roish Goodlooks, your Star Wars song guy.
Hello, podcast. Hello, Joey.
Hello, and we are the podcast that analyzes nerdy pop culture, but it's mostly Star Wars, which inevitably means tears and heartbreak. This episode will be discussing Star Wars, The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 14, Flash Strike. Flash Strike? Almost as hard to say as Star Wars song guy for me. But first, I don't know about you, Royce, but I am absolutely blown away by the popularity of our last episode and by all of the support in the comments and all the conversations in the comments. It has just been so incredible to see. We gained over 185 subscribers just from that video alone, which is mind-blowing. 1,000 subscribers is our next big milestone, so tell your friends, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks so much again for everyone who's subscribed, for all of the great comments, for all of the great conversations. I respond to almost every comment, so get in there and we'll have a conversation. It's super fun. I really enjoy it. Couple of other things, we called out to have some actually comments, and we got a couple. So both Scotty Holiday, who has their own YouTube Star Wars channel, go check them out, Scotty Holiday Star Wars. Both Scotty Holiday and Julian Rao both let us know that actually the planet that Tantiss on is called Wayland. We did not know that, so thank you for that. And which means that I think we didn't even ask for that information until the very end of the episode, like post-credits. So it means that we have some people listening all the way to the end, which is pretty amazing. And then both, again, Julian Rao and Lethal Space Duck both let us know that actually Jax is a Mirialan. I think that's how you pronounce Mirialan. I'm actually me with a phonetic spelling.
Be careful what you ask for, Joey.
Yeah. When I read that, I was like, duh, I should have known that. So thanks for the actuallys, thanks for the course corrections, thanks for the housekeeping, and thanks for everything else. That's enough of my blah, blah, blah. Let's get into the episode. Royce, punch it. Royce, we might not have gotten the planet right, but here's what I did get right. Totally called that they would get shot down. It didn't happen exactly the way I expected it to, but it did happen. The batch did get shot down.
Joey, this was my number one note. They're in hyperspace. They're on the way. And immediately I wrote, ha, in my notes. They'll detect us on approach. Then we'll have to detach and proceed on foot. But the jungle is too dangerous. It was like, That's exactly what you said. Joey was right.
Yes. Hashtag Joey was right. It might have been easy to see coming, but here we are. And then also, I'm going to take credit for being right about Echo putting on that clone armor. Like we've seen a million times in Rebels. I kind of wish they had thought about it sooner before they scrubbed their armor of any identity. But he throws the clone armor on, he finds a droid hand, and then he can just kind of blend in, except he still comes out of that weird droid vacuum pump to get actually out of the ship and onto the base, which I was kind of like, why wouldn't you just walk down the thing? But anyway, hey, you know what? Might not have known Wayland, but they got shot down in the jungle. And also, Crosshair's like, the jungle's dangerous, or the jungle is deadly. We've seen the same quote-unquote deadly creature both times, and no other creature in that jungle. I'd like to see maybe some more creatures, but hey, we're in the end game now. We're going to talk a little bit more about probably what we'd like to see or what we think we should see before this ends.
Listen all the way to the end of the episode for that conversation.
The episode opens up and we're with the Bad Batch in hyperspace, going over this plan of what to do when they get there. Rampart is still pleading with them about maybe consider this a little bit differently, maybe drop me off somewhere. Hey, listen to Crosshair, he knows. Come on, at least listen to him. And they're still shoving Rampart around, which the first time I watched this episode, I was like, nah, that's still kind of funny and silly and stuff. And the second time I watched the episode, I felt bad for Rampart. Let me explain why. This is going back into another thing that this show, in general, over time, has done incredibly well for me. And that is taking characters that I don't think, whoever I am, I don't think should have a redemption, and then kind of pointing them in the direction of a redemption, and then completely getting me on board. This episode got me completely on board with a Rampart redemption. By the second time I watched it, I felt completely different about the character than the first time I watched it, which is incredible for the same episode of television to do. Like, you watch it more than once and feel completely different about a character. That's amazing storytelling. That's like, kudos to the writers. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just cool to have the extra value there that the character is that interesting that you want to spend more time getting to know their motivations, how they're thinking, how they're feeling. And I feel bad for him too. I wrote that note down. Like, Crosshair is still pushing him around. You're on the same team at this point. Get over yourselves here. It makes for a fun dynamic, and there's still a lot of the comic relief with Rampart. But I was starting to feel bad that he was getting pushed around. I have to agree that, like, I'm loving Rampart's addition. I almost wish he was like there earlier. That this is in the last couple episode arc of the season of the series. Maybe we were missing out on some other interesting stories with this guy, but obviously there's a lot to tell within the show. But the conversation where Rampart and Crosshair are talking, Rampart saying, "You're only loyal to yourself. You haven't changed." And Crosshair saying, "No, I've changed. I'm not loyal to the Empire anymore." And Rampart is like, we don't know where he lies. And that's, I think, what you're kind of cluing into is like, that's what's interesting about it is you don't know if Rampart is going to remain loyal to the Imperials and be a quote unquote bad guy, or if he's going to flip flop, be redeemed, be a good guy. And that makes it really interesting. And we need to see what happens. He gets captured in this episode, and even his face, he's like, the ending. Yeah. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him, because he was already in prison. He's broken out, and he may have been he was responsible for the Bad Batch getting there. So he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah. I like what you say about like not necessarily knowing where his loyalties lie or where his loyalties are going to end up lying. But I do think that Omega is the X factor there. If we had not already had so many conversations about Omega infecting the galaxy with good, and that continuing to flow through people to other people, we have a little moment here with Crosshair and Rampart of exactly that thing happening, I think all points to Rampart redemption. I wrote in my notes, Rampart redemption ? Because we're not sure, but I think Omega is the variable in that equation that points it more towards, yes, Rampart redemption, because she has been infecting the galaxy with good. Not only that, but that idea, that language is flowing through Crosshair. In that moment, Crosshair and Rampart both say the same thing to each other from opposite sides. Rampart says, "You used to believe that good soldiers follow orders." And Crosshair says, "Depends on who's giving the orders. The Empire betrayed us both." So that's Crosshair saying, "We're not so different, you and I." And then Rampart says, "You're like me, loyal to no one but yourself. We're not so different, you and I." And so it's this pull, it's this dark side, light side pull, tug of war. Crosshair says, "I've changed." Rampart says, "Sure you have." Obviously, Rampart doesn't believe it, but it's true. Rampart has not seen Crosshair's journey, but we have seen Crosshair's journey. So the idea of that like redemption coming from Omega through Crosshair into Rampart is really what is selling me more on this, which is why when I watched it the second time, I felt bad. And it also made me think like, if Omega were there and like Wrecker shoves Rampart or Crosshair shoves Rampart, would she be like, "Hey, cool it," and like pick Rampart up off the ground and be like, "Are you okay?" And then one of them would say like, he was the Empire, and she would be like, "I didn't give up on you, did I?" Right? It's all of that because she's so friggin' good. This show is ending, man. This show is ending and we might lose.
I'm just falling in love with Rampart.
At least the show is ending and we might lose sight of these characters. At the very least, we will lose sight of these characters. At the very most, we will actually lose these characters. But bringing this level of good to Star Wars, I've talked with people in the comments of our last video about how like Omega is taking the positive teachings of the Jedi out into the galaxy. You and I have talked about it before. And we're losing that. They need to make another show with a character like Omega, I think. But regardless of that, this Rampart Redemption story, or at least possibility, this episode really sold me on it. I was not sold by the time we recorded last week. This has completely turned me around. I felt emotions to and for Rampart, especially when they're like making him jump out of the plane as it's going down, which is just absolutely bonkers.
He's
like
screaming when he does it.
Obviously, no one in their right mind. You three are obviously defective clones. Like this is is a pretty nutso idea, and there's no way you don't get hurt doing this. So he's kind of in the right, and then he's like screaming. The pulley system malfunctions, and he gets shot down by Hunter, and then they crash. And just tremendous voice acting in those moments from Rampart. Noshir Dalal is the actor's name, but just like incredible voice acting in those moments when they're jumping out of the plane. I'm so glad they didn't just throw in a genetic like Wilhelm scream there, because what actually comes out of Rampart is so real and like brutal and like, oh, there's stakes here, right? Like he is afraid. You can hear it in the voice. That's the whole thing with that series of events that happens in that scene. Rampart is afraid, and I can feel it. So I felt bad for Rampart in those moments.
Yeah, he's leadership. He's not the grunt force like the Bad Batch is, and he's got no armor. He didn't have a blaster. Like it made no sense for him to be engaging in the mission they were engaging in. He was like, drop me off at the corner. I'll walk home. But he's in it, and they're not nice to him, and it's not fun for him. And I feel for him, the screaming and everything. Even when the monster shows up and Wrecker's like, I got to cover your mouth. Like he can't handle that situation. And I don't think any of us would if we were in Rampart's shoes, you know?
No. Most of the time I felt like, yeah, he's right. He's probably right here.
I love the defective clone line. Like, why would you come to this place? You guys are crazy. But obviously they have the mission to fulfill.
Yeah. Without backup. It's the same way we started the season, where Wrecker and Hunter are going to that planet, a lot like this planet, where the Empire has abandoned their cloning facility because monsters took over. But they go in without backup. Wrecker says something like, Rex and Echo aren't going to be able to get here. They need 2 rotations to get here. And Hunter is like, well, that's too long. We got to go. Right? They're making kind of the same knee-jerk decisions, not waiting for backup. It's not really what they do. And Rampart, who's not, like you're saying, not a soldier, is kind of right most of the time in this situation.
Yeah. So my question for you, Joey, you're saying I'm excited at the possibility of his redemption. I'm saying I'm falling in love with the character. If he's not redeemed, maybe helps Hemlock take them down if he gives them some insight or whatever, if he has some information. You know, who knows if we even see him in the next episode at all, if that was just like, nope, he's going to get captured. That plot is dust your hands of that one, because that could also be the case. But are you okay with him not being redeemed and maybe ending up being truly the evil British Star Wars guy? You know, crush the rebellion, you know, just jump right back on board.
There's so much to go into the finale that I don't know if I think I would be okay with it, because there's just so much more we have to get to. But I think from my perspective, the more interesting way to go is to have him get redeemed and have him turn. So he's not just your average British white Empire villain. There's a message here. The fact that Omega touches people's hearts in the galaxy and changes them in some way to good, I think would be so interesting to see, especially if he's confronted by Hemlock, especially if they're kind of like putting him through the ringer because they think he helped Clone Force 99. All of those things, and especially if he sees some level of effort from Crosshair that shows him that Crosshair is more altruistic, more thinking about others than himself. Like if he sees that moment, I think that will fully solidify, fully define his rebellion. And then if we see him later, or if he makes a sacrifice next episode for good, or if he comes back in something else, kind of like Callus from Rebels, which again is a character that I did. Dave Filoni, you are the man. It's another character that I never thought I would have wanted to see have redemption arc, and then has a pretty great redemption arc, and then gets cast aside by he gets eventually found out and cast aside by the Empire. It's such a good story. So to answer your question, yeah, I think I would be quote unquote okay with him turning on Clone Force 99 and going back to the Empire. But from my perspective, it would be much more interesting of a story and much more appropriate for the theme to have him redeemed.
I think in a perfect world, yeah, he, becomes a good guy, joins the rebellion. I love that. But I also think it works either way because the Imperials, they're just that oppressive. And it would make sense. That's the system you're in and you want to rebel against that, or you just want to go with the flow sort of thing. And he's got maybe some bargaining chips if he wanted to get back in. But just like we've kind of skirted around, this is just one tiny little thing that we've pulled from this last couple episodes that we've enjoyed, but it's not the whole story, even though we just spent like 12 minutes talking about this.
Yeah.
I love Rampart. I want to know more about it. I want to spend more time with him, but this is the second to last episode in the darned series finale. So who knows how much more time they spend on it. I think this is something that maybe we'll talk about more towards the end of this episode, but yeah, really excited to see where that goes with him. But there was a lot of other stuff going on. So I think another standout moment was Emerie meeting Echo or just discovering Echo. And I'm going to take the mic from you and jump up on a soapbox for a moment because you're talking about how this show is like emotionally impacting you. It's goofy when she discovers him and he's like, oh, just routine, I'm supposed to be here, kind of your comic reliefy thing. He's like, doesn't know how to react and he's putting his hand back on. It's funny when Emerie says to Echo, literally just said like, Echo? ? That just got me. Like you're talking about the voice acting, something in that delivery. I was like, you've nailed the tone here. And it got me. Omega talked about you. There was only a few lines there. We didn't even spend any time in this scene, maybe like 30 seconds. I don't know. But it stood out so powerfully to me there. Just like with Rampart, Emerie's like, I don't know if Emerie's really like a bad guy per se. Like she's just there. She's a clone. She's doing the job that she was like designated to do from birth, right? It wasn't a choice.
Good soldiers follow orders.
Right. But she's now seeing the good in the universe because of Omega. And then this connection with Echo. And I just freaking love that, man.
I felt exactly the same way. As soon as she delivers that line, there's some weight, there's some gravity, there's something about the way that situation unfolds that is very heartfelt and very emotional and very like we're on the cusp of expecting Emerie's redemption, Emerie's like turn. Maybe that's why that line or scene impacts a little bit the way you're talking about, is because we were maybe waiting for that one moment, that like true catalyst to get Emerie to change. And maybe she was waiting for him. Maybe she was waiting for somebody to be like, okay, now we can have a plan. I can't do it on my own and you can't do it without me. But together now we can have a plan and we can save these children. Also, there's no music, or the music is very low in that scene. It's one moment in this episode, with which there were several, where the music cuts out. We just get to spend time with the characters in a very quiet space, and the whole time they're having that conversation. And Echo kind of calling Emerie out, which is like kind of Echo's thing. He's probably the character that sees things in black and white the most. I mean, they called him Echo because he like echoed orders. Like he was that kind of soldier, like very by the book, very black and white by the book. And that's why they started calling him Echo. So it makes sense that he's like, you're a clone. What are you doing? We're like hundreds, thousands of clones turned on the Republic and the Jedi. So I think each a little bit there, like again, influencing each other in that way, the same as we saw maybe from Crosshair and Rampart earlier in the episode, really coming to say, we're kind of the same. You're a clone. How could you be doing this? And her saying, well, we're going to do this together now. We're going to save these children. The voice acting, the whole thing, very heartfelt. I was like, yes, let's go. We're finally there. Emerie finally got it. I've been waiting for her to say the line, we're going to rescue these kids, or we're going to break these kids out. So happy that we've reached that moment.
And then she says the magic words, you just have to trust me, which is like, I don't know if it's a cliche that we keep repeating it here, but like they're right in that dialogue. All of these characters this season, you just have to trust me. I love the parallels that you're saying of we're not so different. Like even though we were on maybe different sides or we have slightly different idiosyncratic, views of the world or whatever, but we're kind of in the same boat. I love that. Come with me on my mission. Well, I don't know though. We're not really on the same team. And it's like, just trust me. It'll all be okay. We keep hearing that line repeated. We keep seeing that theme in the show. I love that. Also, Echo being in the base. I was like, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
Like maybe this can transition us into our final conversation for today. Like Echo was just like walking around the base. he obviously went to the lab and then now he found where Omega was and he met up with Emerie. But like, I was waiting for something to happen. We had said, I want to see all these fires popping off, action ramping up. There was a lot of action. I shouldn't discount that. We even got like kind of a space battle for a moment, with the ships in the beginning, which was really fun.
That was so good.
Great sound effects, great like music there, great visuals. So that was, something we hadn't really had. And who doesn't love, like, I know those aren't TIE fighters, but those like TIE fighter-y looking ships. Actually me in the comments. I was waiting for the action to pop off. Echo was just kind of walking around though. The Bad Batch is just kind of walking around and Omega's just kind of walking around and none of them met each other. And then that's what we're waiting for, is for them all to join forces and break out. I selfishly was waiting for a little bit more of these plots to converge. This episode was great that it wasn't just the Bad Batch and Omega. It was the Bad Batch and Echo and Omega. And we got Hemlock. And we had the kind of, it wasn't just A and B. It was maybe like an A, B, and a C plot. We did a lot of cutting back and forth. There are a lot of things to keep track of, just like we were saying last week on the show. And that was evident in this episode. But I wanted more, and I know I shouldn't. The Bad Batch still isn't in the base. We haven't gotten to the kids, and the kids haven't even broken out. At the end of the darn episode, Omega's still in the lab. It literally ends almost exactly the same as the last episode ended. Omega says, I've already broken out of here before, and I'm going to take you guys with me. I'm going to do it again. And the same thing this episode. I have a plan, and you guys are coming with me. And I love it. It's still great. But we didn't really move forward. We just got more details. The pieces got kind of nudged, which I guess we're moving to the finale. Maybe I'm up too much on a soapbox about this. You have used the term crescendo several times this season of, are we crescendoing into the episode? And sometimes we're doing that, or crescendoing towards the end of the series or the end of the season. We've been doing that a little bit. This episode, I don't know if I felt it as like a crescendo. It was more of a like sustained plateau. And not that that's a bad thing, but I didn't really feel like we amped up the stakes. We're exactly where we were. Like, can the characters meet now for the finale for a wonderful, where are the fires popping off? Where's the alarm bells? It just could be a little bit more ramped up for me. I'm really hoping that next week isn't just like a 20-minute thing, because it still seems like there's a ton to cram into that. If they make concessions, we don't need to see what happens with Rampart. Maybe that's not important. It would be nice, but we want to break the kids out, maybe get a couple other clones out, hopefully have a happy ending back on Pabu. Let's keep it neat and tight. But then what do? I'll throw it back to you, Joey. Now we're introducing a monster, and is that Omega's plan? We could speculate. There's so many things that they could do in 22 minutes next week. I'm hoping it's more than a 22-minute episode. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. Like you said, we're the show's ending. We're not going to be with these characters anymore. Like, hopefully it's satisfying. I'm a little bit worried though, because we didn't leave off on a cliffhanger. This wasn't like the first half of a 2-part finale, right? This was a great second half from last week, I think. Last week and this week are great together.
We keep saying that. That's so funny.
Obviously, there's a thread that we're following, but I still feel like we need a 2-part finale, though, from this. This doesn't feel like the first part to me. What do you think about this?
I love this. More passion, or whatever that meme is. Yeah, I have it in my notes that it would be really cool, Dave Filoni and Lucasfilm, it would be super cool if next week, the final episode of The Bad Batch, also falling in the week of May the 4th, if there was a secret extra episode. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. A
secret track.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do stuff like this where they throw us a little bit extra. It doesn't seem outside of the realm of possibility that we would get to next week and they would be like, well, actually, surprise.
Have any of the episodes actually been an hour long?
I don't think so.
It's either just been a 2-part?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Secret track.
I would also love, so Omega has seen the chaos that the Zillo Beast can wreak, right? We saw it last season. Her plan is to set the thing free somehow and have it cause damage, which I also think would be a finally fun, fitting end for the Zillo Beast questions. We've been stuck on the Zillo Beast since the Clone Wars. I think this could be a really fun end to answering those questions and just having it be fine. Omega lets it go. It destroys the facility. The Empire abandons Wayland and the monsters rule it. And then it would also set it up for some cool storytelling in the future. Someone would have to visit the planet that's overrun with Empire science experiment monsters. I think that would be totally fun. I don't know. I think that would be a good way for things to go out. And yeah, there's a big jump between this episode and next episode, getting to the questions or tying all the bows if next week's episode opens up to bwah, bwah, and it's just like we see the vault and it's dark and broken and lights are flashing and alarms are, and it's just like Omega had released the Zillow Beast off screen and we are seeing the fallout from that, that's where the episode picks up, then that would be great. Then we'd like jump ahead. Everything's chaotic. It's exactly what we said. I would love it if it opened that way. But we have so much to get through here. We have Echo and Emerie breaking the kids out, even though they're trying to break themselves out. We have the batch. The base is on lockdown. How are they going to get in? There's 2 mountains. Like, what do we do? Is Echo trying to contact Rex? They want to free the other clones. We haven't seen a clone assassin in episodes, like at least 2 episodes. Like, are we going to get answers there? And this episode really also made me think like, wow, their scrubbed armor looks so much like the clone assassin armor. So are they connected? Like, is the clone assassin connected to the Bad Batch somehow? Anyway, there's so many. Ventress, Rex, what do we do? There's so many things to tie up here. Can we get it done in one 20-minute episode?
I mean, it'll be action freaking packed if they do all that. Let's put it that way.
Here's what I think. I think like we try to be very generous, but we also want to critique the thing that we love. You know, it's part of art. The question about being satisfied by an ending, if it answers all the questions next week and we can come into the studio and be like, whoa, best ending ever. Or if we can come in and still be generous about like subverting expectations, right? Like, well, when we think of series finale, we think of a big bang blowout, right? But this maybe wasn't entirely that. But here's why it's still good. And here's why it's still meaningful. They did such a good job of making me love every moment of this show that it could just end. And I will come in here and say, this is what I thought was great about this episode. Here's maybe something I didn't appreciate as much, but maybe it didn't build. Maybe it didn't crescendo. Maybe we didn't get the big triumphant thing. But here's why I still think it was good. It's why I also defend the finale of Lost. Whatever. Come at me. All that being said, next week's episode, the one that we know is happening, is called The Cavalry Has Arrived. So that to me says big, blockbuster, high stakes, action-packed ending that I think we'll get. Hopefully it will be satisfying. There's just so much I want to see. We end up saying this at every finale, but this happens to be the series finale. And there's just, it seems like a lot to pack in to a 20-minute episode.
I couldn't agree more. Also, you're making me realize that you're saying, I loved every moment, you know, of this show. All the different things we've explored through it have been wonderful through the series. And a lot of the things that we end up really riffing on for the longest are these kind of like small, you know, heartfelt, emotional, character-driven moments like this Echo and Emerie scene. I've been thinking about it all day, ever since I watched the episode this morning. And it's a very small moment, and it isn't a huge consequence. They just ran into each other and said hello, but it just seems to mean so much. So maybe even, like you said, like it could, quote unquote, just end. Maybe we don't need the pew-pews. Maybe if it's slower, but we have some of these great heartfelt moments that the show is really, really great at. And maybe if it's not even just heartfelt moments, but the just emotional heartstring pulling moments, right? Like it might not be a happy moment, it might be a sad moment. The show is great at both. And so maybe not being pew-pews, but you set up the Zillow Beast monster. So we know there's going to be some chaos. And in 22 minutes just seems like a lot to cram in all the action. But 22 minutes is plenty to get some of these amazing moments. Like we did get that moment in this episode, even though there was a space battle, there was a jungle monster, we were walking through hallways. So it's not to say that they can't do all of these things.
Yeah, I think that that's the best way to get it. So we could talk a little bit about labels here. We put these labels, series finale. Whoa, it's the end. It's like an action show. It's a Star Wars show. So we think of it as being this, like you're doing the trench run, right? Here we go. You're going to blow up the thing, which is fine. But all we have talked about, what we focus on when we're analyzing these episodes are the moments that need or that we want to analyze. We don't need to analyze the destruction of the Death Star, but we do want to analyze the emotional moments and the impact that it has and what it means for what we love about Star Wars. And that's what we do here.
Yeah, the best part is when he turns his targeting computer off, right? He trusts his feelings,
exactly. Right? Trust your feelings. So that being said, it's a call to action for you and I, and a call to action for anyone who's still listening at this point to just live in it. Just be generous with it. Just exist in it. Let's all try not to like be put under the weight of it being a finale or be put under the weight of it needing to be jam action packed. But let's just be able to exist in it and be like, I loved the emotional storytelling that they told. I loved what we saw from the characters in the redemptions or the not, whatever it is. Let's try to be generous going into it. I know it's hard going into a finale of a thing, being excited as we are, and then inevitably maybe getting let down because it didn't live up to our expectations.
Very well said there. Yeah. All right, listeners, what are your expectations for the season finale? I got pretty heated. So join me on the dark side. Let the hate flow through. Let the speculation flow through. Down in the comments, let's keep this conversation going. What are you thinking about Rampart? What are you thinking about Emerie and Echo? What about this Zillow Beast? What about the pew-pews? What about the heartfelt moments? Drop your comments if you're watching here on YouTube. And remember to subscribe here on YouTube because we're going for this 1,000 subscriber mark. Be part of our 1,000 subscriber club. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Make sure to tune in next week for more nerdy pop culture, but mostly Star Wars. I've been Royce.
I've been Rampart because I like him now.
And we've been
Krypton
to
Wayland.
All Around.
We got it right that time. Thanks, everyone.